Tristan da Cunha is a seldomly visited island almost midway between South America and Africa.
Leaving South Georgia, we had a 5-day transit to reach Tristan da Cunha. Even though we had departed South Georgia was not finished with us yet, as we could see fur seals, albatrosses, and giant petrels around the ship.
The 5 days of transit time was happily passed by watching the birds, reading, and relaxing.
We opted to have supper out on the deck, which turned out to be very cold. At the beginning of the transit, we were still passing icebergs, so the ship had its searchlights on at night to help detect any ice that was missed by radar. There were days of fog on end as we passed through the Antarctic convergence.
We landed at Tristan da Cunha and then sailed for a landing on Nightingale Island and then returned briefly to Tristan before sailing east towards Cape Town. After 5 days of transit, we arrived off of Tristan da Cunha early in the morning. While we were at Tristan, the low-hanging cloud cover never did lift, so we only could see the base of the 2,000-meter high Queen Mary's Peak. Tristan da Cunha is the most remote inhabited archipelago in the world, lying 2,000 kilometers from the nearest inhabited land, namely St. Helena, 2,400 kilometers from the nearest continental land, namely South Africa, and 3,600 kilometers from South America. In 1961, a volcanic eruption outside of town forced the islanders to evacuate to England for 2 years. The Tristan group of islands have a population of about 300, which is located in the main settlement named Edinburgh of the Seven Seas. This population is thought to have descended from 15 ancestors who arrived on the island at various times, mainly in the 19th century. The family share just 8 surnames, namely Glass, Green, Hagen, Lavarello, Patterson, Repetto, Rogers, and Swain. Due to the regular rough seas, about a third of the attempted passenger ship landings are unsuccessful. Even though we were at anchor off of Edinburgh, there were anxious moments while we awaited to see if we would be able to get ashore. Due to the large swells, getting ashore was an adventure, starting with just getting safely into the Zodiacs as they bobbed up and down, and then as the Zodiacs rode up and down over the swells. Kelshot Harbor is a very small harbor with numerous dawasa protecting the harbor against the waves caused by the persistent westerly winds. When we landed on Tristan, it had been 11 months since the last ship was able to put its passengers ashore there. Stepping ashore, we were warmly welcomed by a group of locals. One source of valuable foreign earnings comes from the royalties from the crayfish or Tristan rock lobster industry, which sells mainly to the United States and Japan. The Tristan rock lobster features on the coat of arms and flag of Tristan da Cunha. Fortunately, our ship's chef bought lobster for a lobster supper on board. All Tristan families are farmers, owning their own livestock, some of which freely wanders around town. All land is communally owned, and outsiders are not allowed to buy land or settle on Tristan. The town's government buildings are small and unpretentious. The town's fire alarms are simple but effective. St. Joseph's Catholic Church was built in 1996 to replace a smaller church. Atop its spire is a weather vane decorated with a southern right whale. The school on the island is named St. Mary's School, with a motto of wider horizons. However, education is limited, such that children leave school at age 16. There are many garages in town, but their construction is simple, with repurposed materials being widely used. We had the option of hiking up to the top of the 1961 volcano beside town, or walking several kilometers out to the potato patches. The potato patches seem more interesting, as it would allow us to see the countryside outside of town. Once outside of the town, there is a grassy plain that runs down to the potato patches. The verdant plain slopes down to the sea cliffs and is crossed by normally dry riverbeds called gulches that spring to life during heavy rains. The road running down to the potato patches winds its way across the plain, but a recent washout has forced the road back from the sea cliffs in places. The potato patches are small walled fields where potatoes and other vegetables have been grown for over 150 years. The fields offer shelter from the gale-force winds on this exposed part of the island. Every island family owns and cultivates several patches, and all help to plant, tend, and harvest the crops. At the potato patches are small huts that provide beds, stoves, chairs, and tables for islanders who want a weekend away from the settlement of Edinburgh. Leaving the potato patches, it was time to walk back to town and wander around to see the picturesque village. Due to the high cost of shipping goods to Tristan, all resources are fully utilized, including the shipping containers. Tristan da Cunha is part of the British Overseas Territories of St. Helena, Ascension, and Tristan da Cunha, with its capital on St. Helena. The administrator of Tristan da Cunha is the head of government and representative of the governor of St. Helena in Tristan da Cunha. He lives in a nice home called the Residency and has his own flag, a Union Jack with the addition of the territory's coat of arms in the center of the flag. Looking at the large boats that were tied down, it was obvious that Edinburgh of the Seven Seas experiences very high winds indeed. Several people from Tristan dined with us, and after dinner they returned to the settlement of Edinburgh, guided by the beams from the ship's searchlights. We spent the night off Edinburgh at the request of the island's doctor, who was operating on a villager and wanted to wait until the morning to decide if the patient would have to be evacuated on our ship to Cape Town. Unfortunately, the patient died overnight. Nightingale Island is an active volcanic island of some 3 square kilometers in area. It is 35 kilometers south-southwest of Tristan. Nightingale Island is known as a breeding ground for various types of seabirds, and wildlife conservation efforts are ongoing, in part funded by money that the tourists pay for the mandatory guides from Tristan. When we arrived off Nightingale, the surface of the ocean around us was dotted with giant petrels that were aggressively competing amongst themselves for food. It had been 11 months since the cruise ship landed its passengers on the island. We were lucky that the conditions were good enough for us to land. There was lots of bobbing around during our Zodiac ride over the chop to the small landing site on Nightingale. When we landed on Nightingale Island, it had been 11 months since the last passenger ship was able to put its passengers ashore. Nightingale is rarely visited, except by a few Tristanians and the infrequent tourists and research scientists. It is a wildlife refuge and mainly left in its natural state. Thus there is no easy way from the seaside rocks to the top of the cliffs. We had to climb up using ropes that had been tied to nails which had been driven into the rock face. Great care was required to avoid stumbling, as tussock grass covered parts of the ropes and the surface was rough. Once atop the cliff, the terrain flattened out, but it was covered by a dense 2-meter high tussock grass. Fortunately, Tristanians cut a path through the grass, otherwise it would have been very difficult to get around. Stumbling along the path over the tussock grass clumps, there were several bird species to be seen, including the yellow-nosed albatross and its chicks. They stood beside the trail and snapped lustily as we walked by. I have to get by you, because I gotta go around you. Right. Well, I'd love to be able to fly, but I can't. What you doing? You don't appear to be entirely happy to see me. Okay, well, you're not really snapping that much. I don't want to disturb you. A rough walk over the tussock grass clumps to the sea cliffs was rewarded with a close encounter with a group of northern rockhopper penguins. In 2011, a bulk carrier ran into Nightingale Island. Needless to say, the ship broke apart, spilling both its cargo of soybeans and, more importantly, its fuel oil. The northern rockhopper penguins, with their black and yellow frills on their heads, were the most beautiful of the 7 penguin species that we saw during our voyage. Walking back to the route down to the pickup point, we again passed by the yellow-nosed albatross, who was no happier to see us even if we were leaving. Arriving at the cliff down to the boat pickup point, we stopped to see the view out over the satellite islands called Middle and Stoltenhof Islands that lie a short distance offshore from Nightingale. We watched the fur seals on the rocks as sunset was coming on. Returning to our ship on a Zodiac, we could at last see the peak on Nightingale Island, and were treated to a beautiful sunset. Leaving the Tristan group of islands, we sailed 5 days east to Cape Town, which was to be our final destination for our cape-to-cape crossing of the South Atlantic Ocean.
Take me somewhere nice, to some tired island in your heart called paradise.